Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar, Saving Your Neighborhood Cats. I'm Sarah Muriella with the Pasadena Humane Society, and with us today is Chris Ramon. Hi Chris.
Hello.
And Izzy Nidetz. Hi Izzy.
Hi. Hey.
They're both part of our foster care team, and I'll let them introduce themselves in just a bit. So before I turn it over to Chris and Izzy, I just wanted to share with you some webinar housekeeping reminders. So you should be able to hear us. If you can't, please double check your components, but we cannot hear you. You're automatically muted by GoToWebinar. If time permits and we have extra time for questions at the end, we may choose to take some questions individually and unmute you so you can share that question with the audience. Also, you can see us. You should be able to see my screen right now, but we can't see you. So if you're in your jammies or hanging out with your pets right now, no worries. We're going to ask that you save your questions for the end. And the reason for that is that we're hoping that your questions get answered during Chris and Izzy's presentation, but also we're saving time at the end for a Q&A. So the way that you're going to participate in the Q&A at the end of the presentation is by using that question mark icon to submit any questions you have in the chat. Your question will only be seen by me, the organizer, and as time permits, I'm going to try my best to share your questions with Chris and Izzy so that they can address them at the end during the Q&A. Now, if we have extra time beyond that Q&A chat, you may be able to raise your hand and ask a question. And that question means that you're going to share that with the whole audience. So we'll all be able to hear your question. If in that case we have time, you'll need to unmute yourself and we'll also unmute you. Now, the way that you're going to unmute yourself depends on what platform you're using or what device you're using. And so you can see the different microphone icons. So if you get called on to share your question, you'll need to unmute yourself, and that's how you'll do that. We do want to tell you about some upcoming webinars we have. We have Photographing Your Pet on May 13th, that's next Wednesday, with one of our amazing volunteer photographers, Glenn Kami. He's amazing. So if you're interested in learning tips and tricks, whether you're kind of a pro or a beginner, that's a wonderful webinar to join. And also Dog Massage Basics with Amber, who is a certified animal massage therapist, and that's May 20th. To register for these webinars, you'll need to go to pasadenahumane.org/workshops, and we'll have a lot more coming for June. All right, so at this point, I'm gonna ask Chris and Izzy to take it away. They're gonna quickly introduce themselves as well, and just give me a minute to switch screens. Thanks, Izzy.
Okay. Perfect. So can everybody see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Gonna go. Perfect. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Izzy. I'm the foster manager at the Pasadena Humane Society. I've been working for Pasadena Humane for about 2.5 years, but I've also just worked with animals in a veterinary capacity and the shelter capacity for the last 10 years of my life. I really enjoy what I do, and it's been really fun to contribute in this way. So being a foster manager is really fun. And I have Chris here with us today too. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. I help oversee the foster program with Izzy, and I also oversee our kitten nursery and transport programs. I've worked at the Pasadena Humane Society for 1.5 years, and I've been working in animal welfare and sheltering for the past 5 years.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and get started on Saving Your Neighborhood Kittens. So we put this webinar together just to help inform everybody about what to do when you find kittens and how to go from there. So we'll get started on that. Let me change that. There we go. Perfect.
So I'm going to start with talking about cats in our community and just looking at some basics on outdoor living of community cats. So the Humane Society of the United States did a survey back in 2018 to try and figure out nationally how many free roaming community cats live in the United States. Of course, this is a very difficult task to kind of undertake. Cats are very stealth, and trying to mark one or at least find representation for everyone is a little bit challenging. The more conservative numbers that we're looking at for the United States are 35 million, but there's been other studies to suggest that there are up to 75 million cats living on the street, either in colonies or that are just generally free roaming. Specific to Los Angeles County, the conservative numbers that are last recorded are about 2 million. But there's also some studies to suggest that there are up to 4 million free roaming cats in Los Angeles County. Just looking at community cats as a different topic of conversation, these can be very unsocialized cats. These can be very friendly cats. They'll sometimes colonize, and you'll hear things about feral cat colonies. You'll also notice sometimes you might meet a cat on the street that will walk up to you and display friendly behaviors. This can be subsequent from having a colony caretaker who provides food and water, shelter. They sometimes do outreach for neighboring businesses to let those businesses know that somebody is taking care of these, to make sure that they don't continue to overpopulate or reproduce, who can sometimes intervene if there's medical care that's needed. One of the biggest identifiers of a managed colony is going to be an ear tip. So what an ear tip is, it's about 1/4 of an inch that would be missing from either the left or right ear. And that's a universal sign that states that somebody's taken the time to take this cat to a veterinarian, have it sterilized, vaccinated, and have a preliminary intake exam taken to make sure that it's healthy enough to be returned back to its colony or back to the area where it lives. I think that the staggering number that comes from all of the unsterilized animals that live either nationally or within Los Angeles County is that 90% of the kittens that are born that fled into shelters, that are taken into rescues or just raised by Good Samaritans who find them, 90% of those cats came from cats that were born on the street. So when we consider the ratio of kittens that come in and where they're coming from, this kind of adds to that greater conversation of trap neuter return programs, return to field programs, spay neuter return programs, anything that can offset the overall overpopulation. So when the slide in front of you kind of demonstrates what can happen between 1 to 2 adult cats that have hit sexual maturity. Again, there's different studies that will suggest the amount of cats that can output over any given amount of time. This is one of the more accepted and surveys that's rooted in science when we consider how many cats one cat can have. So again, going back to the idea that even conservatively, there's 35 million free roaming cats in the United States. And as you can see in front of you, what the output would be between 2 adult cats. Those numbers are staggering.
Which brings us over to kitten season. So kitten season is a term used to describe when we see an influx of kittens. So cats mate seasonally, typically in the spring and the summer, so the warmer months there. For us in Los Angeles, where it's a lot warmer, these warmer climates kind of extend kitten season. For us at our shelter, we see kittens come through our doors from February to November, just because our climate is so nice for cats to be mating. So it's more of a kitten year for us. We see kittens year round come in. Definitely we see peaks in the summertime. So especially during these warmer months, you may see more cats being active, you might hear them, and you might see community cats and kittens running around your neighborhood. So what should you do if you find kittens in your neighborhood? This is a question we get a lot, and there's plenty of things you can do. And I know, like for me, my first time I saw kittens, I got really stressed out. My knee-jerk reaction was to grab them, put them in a box, and bring them somewhere. But now that I know a little bit more, we can share our knowledge that we put together so that you all can feel prepared when you do find kittens. So for us, our first step when you see kittens is to first wait and watch. It's important to see if there is a mother around. Kittens have, they have the best chance if they're with their mom. Mom has this mother's milk that has all the nutrition that they need, keeps them healthy. She teaches them important manners and things like that that help them develop into these wonderful cats. And so for us, we ask people to wait to see if there is a mom for about 4 to 6 hours. Mom is typically pretty stealthy. She's maybe hiding in some trees or bushes around. She might be out looking for food. She could possibly be looking for a new place to put her kittens. And so instead of going to go pick up the kittens, it's important to leave them where they are and wait and see. We also want people to check in with neighbors or on apps like Nextdoor to see if anybody has seen a mother cat around, or if they know the status of her, or if they even know about the kittens, just to get a full picture of what's going on, because maybe someone's already monitoring them and they just might be moving throughout your neighborhood. We also recommend to people to stay a far distance away from the kittens. Your presence can actually kind of deter mom from coming back. So if she sees humans, she doesn't know who you are, it may make her want to abandon her kittens. So it's important to keep space and keep eyes on them, but obviously don't come too close into contact with them. And so that's kind of the tips that we have for people who find kittens. And from there, you need to determine if mom is there and if she isn't there. But if she is there, or how to tell if mom's there, Chris has some tips on how to do that.
So there's a couple things that you'll want to look at for right off the bat to see if mom's around. The first thing is the overall condition of the kittens. What I suggest is asking yourself, how do they look? Are they all nestled together? Do they look relatively healthy? Some of the red flags would be if they have goopy eyes. But some other things to suggest that mom is in the picture is that they're well groomed, they're clean, they're nestled into a very hard to get area. Those are usually strategic moves by mom to keep them safe. While wanting to keep your distance, maybe your first primary interaction would be just to examine them to make sure that they're healthy. If they have full bellies, that's a good sign that mom is around. And yeah, if they're in a warm, dark place, that's usually something to suggest that mom is in the picture. And while she may not be present in that very moment, going back to what Izzy said, she could be out looking for a secondary food source or another place to move the kittens at a later date.
Perfect. So if mom didn't come back.
So if mom didn't come back, you're going to use that same kind of checklist to look at signs to suggest that mom's not around, or if this is an appropriate time for a human intervention. What you're going to want to look for is labored breathing. If any of the kittens look like they're in respiratory distress, if their coats look unkept, usually in the first week of life or so, the umbilical cord will fall off, usually encouraged by the mom. If there's any kind of remnants of that, that will usually suggest that mom's not in the picture. If they're kind of left in the open and seem to be a little bit scattered and not in a warm place, those are also things that suggest that the kittens might not have a mom to be taking care of them. The biggest red flag for me would be if these kittens are cold, that's either a sign to suggest that If mom is in the picture, it still might be appropriate for human intervention.
I forgot to touch on, so if mom does come back, what do we want to do for the kittens there if she's around?
If mom does come back, this is great because, as you mentioned, this is always plan A. The nutrients that mom can provide are second to none. What you'll want to do is perhaps consider putting a food source 20 or 30 feet away from the nest of the kittens so that you're not attracting other wildlife or some predators that may jeopardize the kitten's safety. Making sure that she has water. If you are inclined, you can put a shelter to put the kitten somewhere. This kind of comes down to the fundamentals that cats need, or adult cats need, two things. They need shelter and they need food. And if you found kittens and mom's in the picture, and if you can provide both of those things, this will incentivize the mom to let the kittens stay there, knowing that she has a safe place with both food and shelter.
Great. So it's time for human intervention if the following happens. So if the kittens are indeed in direct danger, they should be brought in by a human for safety reasons. If you know the mom isn't around, like unfortunately, we do have a lot of wildlife that often preys on outdoor cats. And so it might be possible that mom may have fallen victim to the wildlife here, or even often we see that sometimes moms will get hit by cars. And if you know that for sure, then it's time to intervene. We want people to, if you're deciding to make this decision to intervene, we want human intervention to be a commitment. So if you're making that decision to help these kittens out, you're committed to this litter and you want to help them, and helping foster them is the best way to do that. If you don't have the ability to do that, again, we recommend posting on Nextdoor or texting friends, family, posting on social media to see if there is someone who can help if human intervention is necessary. For a great example of human intervention is this kitten in this photo. This is little Bluebell. Bluebell and his sister, they came into our shelter last summer. The two kittens had been thrown out of a truck a couple of streets down from us, and a Good Samaritan saw this happen, and she came, she went on the road and picked up the two kittens. That's a situation where we know, there's no mom. These kittens were taken away from a situation where they possibly had a mom, but we wouldn't be able to know where they came from. They were in direct danger. They were in the street, injured from being tossed out there. And so the person who picked them up and brought them in, we educated her on how to properly bottle feed, gave her supplies, and she was willing to foster them for the 4 weeks that they needed bottle feeding. And she just wanted to bottle feed them, and she got them to the point where they were weaned, and then we moved them on to a different foster parent. So that worked out really well, and that's a great example of when you should intervene. These kittens were in direct danger, and she was able to save them. So it brings us to becoming a foster. So you should feel empowered to become a foster on your own or with an organization. If you find kittens on the street, like in that example from my last slide, and it's time to intervene, you can bring those kittens home and start working on the proper care that they need and getting them healthy and raising them to where they can be adoptable. The greatest part about fostering is that the kittens don't have to be out in the street where they would have been in danger and at risk of their life, and they get great socialization and stay healthy in a foster home. And instead, they don't have to be in a kennel like in this photo. They can be in someone's lap and get super comfortable with human interaction, which is great.
So this is a resource that you'll be able to find on the Pasadena Humane website, and I find myself using it pretty often. When aging a kitten, this is going to help you determine what level of intervention is necessary, going back to situations where there is a mom in the picture or there's not a mom in the picture. These pictures are pretty universal that represent the life stages up to 2 months. So if there's ever a case where you do find kittens and you need assistance in aging them to figure out what level of intervention is appropriate, we will have this as a resource on our website.
Yeah, this resource is really great. And so how we've kind of broken up this webinar is that we're going to talk about bottle babies. So that's the age range from newborn to 4 weeks old. And then we'll break it up later into weaned kittens, which are kittens aged from 5 weeks to 8 weeks. So moving on to bottle babies and the care that they need. Bottle babies, again, are kittens that are aged 0 to 4 weeks old. They need bottle feeding every 2 to 4 hours. They should be getting KMR or kitten milk replacement. It's a powder formula that you'll make at home. As you can see in the photo, this person is bottle feeding them. They also need stimulation to urinate and defecate. So normally if they were with mom, she would be grooming them, licking them, feeding them, and her licking them is how she gets them to stimulate and go to the bathroom. And so now that they don't have mom, they're orphaned, you have to mimic what mom would do. So you need to provide them with a heat source because mom would be nice and warm in their nest. You need to do the stimulation for peeing and pooping, and then feeding them the KMR as their food source until they can eat on their own, which is when they're weaned. Right now, these kittens are too young to receive any vaccinations or dewormer, and so you just have to do basic care for them. A typical setup that we do for bottle babies, we have these cool things called dens, which are on the left side there. It's that little box. We recommend using that for kittens that are newborn to maybe 2 to 3 weeks old. That age range, they're not moving around a lot. They haven't really figured out how to use their limbs. Their eyes aren't really open. Their ears aren't really open. And so this box really helps keep them warm and safe because we don't want them disappearing somewhere in your house. So you know that they're safe and secure in this box. You can set up the heating pad in there and everything, and then just open the box when you need to see them, put them back in, and then you're done. As kittens become more mobile, so maybe that 3 to 4 week range, they can upgrade to a playpen like the one on the right. This playpen is really great. It's easy to clean, keeps the kittens secure, but they can also work out their muscles and start getting more mobile and stronger as they grow. You can also start setting up like a litter box to see if they'll move on to that when they reach that 4 week range. But it offers a good amount of space for you to kind of manage the kittens in your home without taking too much space in your house. We have a lot of foster volunteers who live in studios or don't really have like a spare room or anything like that. But these offer really good alternatives for space and keeping the kittens safe. If you don't have a den, you can use a cat carrier or just like a secure box. Stuff like that is really helpful. And then the supplies you need.
So this slide kind of it represents a baseline of supplies that you'll need for critical care. As Izzy mentioned, kitten milk replacer, there's a couple other brands that you can use, but fundamentally you want to stay away at all costs from giving any kind of kittens that need supplemental feeding, cow's milk, that can do some damage to their GI tract. Following the instructions on the KMR, and then keeping it refrigerated after it's been opened. The second thing is a snuggle safe. You can also use a traditional heating pad. More than anything, making sure that they have an external heat source. Just as a reminder, kittens between 0 and 4 weeks can't regulate their own body temperature. So this is crucial to getting them to that 4 week mile marker. A syringe or a bottle along with a miracle nipple. You can purchase these on Amazon. The long ones or short ones are both fine, and these will mimic mom's anatomy and making it easier for the kittens to latch and ensuring that every feeding they're getting the amount of kitten milk replacer that they need. And then simply a digital scale. You can purchase these on Amazon also. Any kind of typical kitchen scale that weighs in grams. one of the things that you'll also want to make sure during any kind of critical care or neonatal care is making sure that your kitten or kittens are putting on weight every day.
Okay, and then once they reach weaning age, they need different requirements, which Chris will go over.
Yeah, this is my favorite life stage of kittenhood. This is when their personalities start to come out a little bit more. They're slightly more independent than they were at week 2. And this is when most of those developmental milestones start coming to light. Weaned kittens are a lot of fun. The transition from supplemental feeding to either dry food and wet food. This is when they'll start to drink water on their own. This is also when DNA kind of takes its course, and introducing the cat to the litter box and showing them where they need to go to the bathroom. Nature usually takes its course, and all you have to do is just show them where the litter box is, because that's where they'll end up going to the bathroom.
Perfect. And so weaned kitten setup is going to be different from your bottle babies. These kittens are bigger, they need a lot more space. Typically, we ask our fosters to set up kittens in a bathroom, spare room. This is a great example of a really great weaned kitten setup. You can see that there's the litter box in the back. There's a place for them to nap. They have food and water bowls, and they have plenty of toys. And what's great about the bathroom setup is that it's super easy to clean. If they make a mess, you can just easily wipe it up. And then in between litters, you can really disinfect, which will help keep other foster litters safe if you continue to foster. An important thing to take note of is that your space for your weaned kittens, you need to kitten proof it. So take a look at your space and see, kind of try to envision what it would be like if you were the kitten and what you would get into. So I learned the hard way. I set up kittens in my bathroom and I forgot to close the toilet seat. And that's something you need to think about because kittens will try to jump in. They're very curious. And so you have to take note and really pay attention to make sure that you're closing that lid so you don't have any swimming kittens. If you have any small spaces where a kitten would want to hide, you want to really block those so that your kitten doesn't get lost, or if they're shy kittens, it's going to be really hard to get them out. So kind of just envision what a kitten would want to get into if they're in your bathroom or in your spare room that you have set up for them, so that they can stay safe and comfortable as they grow up and get ready to be adoptable cats. It's a really great way. Honestly, weaned kittens is a good start to fostering if you want to try it out at all. And it's a great setup. It's pretty easy. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment with a bathroom, and that's where I set up my kittens. I close the door so I can keep them separated from my own cats, just in case there's any disease spread there. So it's pretty easy setup for the weaned guys. And then moving on to what you'll need for these guys. They are able to eat on their own and use the litter box, so it's important to get them wet food and dry food. We use Hill Science Diet kitten formulated food. You're welcome to use whatever brand you want to use. Just make sure that it's formulated for kittens. It's really important that you purchase that because it has vital nutrients and supplements that they need to develop and grow. Their bones are growing. They need everything they can get so that they can be strong and healthy. And then the other thing is the litter box. So for us at PHS, we send our fosters home with disposable litter boxes, and we use a corn-based litter so that if the kittens ingest it, which they probably will because they're curious and they're learning, because it's corn-based, they'll just poop it out. So there shouldn't be any problems there. You'll want to stay away from like clumping or clay litters just because that can get stuck in their gut if they ingest a good amount of it. So any kind of natural-based, corn-based litters are good for kittens. As you're fostering kittens, medical needs might arise. So we ask our foster volunteers to monitor on a daily basis. And so if you're fostering a kitten on your own, it would be important to like either get a log or some sort of journal so that you can keep track every day of any changes in their weight, so check weight daily. We ask that people check the ears, eyes, and nose for any discharge, any kind of funky smells, or they look dirty. And also to check their urination and their stools in the litter box. All of those things can tell us a lot about how well your kitten is doing, especially poop. We love poop. We get a lot of pictures of poop on a daily basis. And a lot, yeah. But that's a really important indication of how well your kitten is doing and developing. And so if you notice any changes, it's something to take note of. And if you're fostering on your own, it'll be good to have a relationship with a vet clinic that's local so that you can have that support there. If you're fostering through our organization, we provide the medical support, and we have vets on staff that can give us advice on what to do as far as treatment goes. And we also do vaccinations and deworming every 3 to 4 weeks for our kittens. Organizations are all different. They have different protocols, as well as private veterinary clinics. So it's good to check in with those to make sure you're following protocol. Oh, and a common thing with kittens is, one, a lot of kittens have diarrhea. So that's an important thing to take note of, but diarrhea can be caused by a lot of things. It could be caused by change in food. It can be caused by viruses, disease, bacteria. So if you see diarrhea, it's important to get like a vet appointment so that you can see what exactly is going on. And another common thing is upper respiratory infection, which is just like a common cold for kittens. So if you see goopy eyes, goopy nose, that might be a sign that there's some upper respiratory infection and should go, and the kitten should see a doctor.
So at this point, you've had this really long.
And then once they're healthy and ready for adoption, yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Finding homes. There's been some commitment on your part, depending on the life stage that you have invited these kittens into your home. If you found them as neonates or if you found them as weaned kittens, that 8-week, 2-pound threshold is usually what dictates whether or not this kitten is now, it can be sterilized. So at this point, they're going to get spayed or neutered. And then depending on if you are fostering through a rescue or if you are fostering independently, would kind of dictate what your adoption channels and outlets look like. If you are doing this on your own because you found kittens and you've been able to get them through all of those milestones, my suggestion is using any kind of social media outlets, going on Nextdoor, and then just doing a screening and vetting process with members of your community. Also looking for spay and neuter resources. I would suggest Googling, just doing a simple internet search for a high volume spay neuter clinic that can offer that sterilization at a low cost. If you are fostering through our program at PHS, at 8 weeks is usually when we'll start to schedule kittens coming back. Outside of COVID, we would be doing sterilization right at 8 or 9 weeks, provided that the kittens are healthy and are hardy, at which point we would use our traditional adoption outlet. Yeah, I think that that's it for what finding homes looks like. I know that this can also be an emotional process and it can be hard to say goodbye to them. Ultimately, the goal is to always say goodbye, because hopefully you found this process to be very rewarding. And going back to what started this conversation, when we consider the overpopulation nationally or locally, there's always going to be a need for foster homes and temporary placement so that we can get tiny kittens into bigger kittens and then find adoption outlets for them.
All right, well, I'm going to rejoin. Hi, it's Sarah again. I'm going to be a disembodied voice so I don't take up too much screen space. We do want to open up for questions in just a moment. So if you have some questions that didn't get answered in the presentation, please go ahead and submit those using that question mark icon. We wanted to share with you a few Pasadena Humane Society resources. So if you're interested in fostering through our program, you can get some information on what that process looks like. It's a very easy onboarding process, and we provide a ton of support. Chris and Izzy are amazing. So you can check us out at pasadenahumane.org/foster. or send us an email. I know that some of you might be interested in a sample of that kitten care log that Izzy referenced. So if you're fostering on your own or you've taken in kittens from your neighborhood, email us if you want a copy of that. Also, if you're unable to foster kittens in your space, my dog Tula has issues, and so we can't foster kittens at the moment, but there's other ways to support our foster kittens. And one way you can do that is to purchase an item like that KMR milk replacement, or even a syringe. There's all kinds of things, litter, that you can donate to us. So that's at pasadenahumane.org/wishlist. And that will come directly from Amazon to our shelter, so it's pretty easy. And then again, if you're fostering on your own, you can always get kitten supplies at our shelter shop. We are doing phone orders for curbside pickup, and the number is there, and the extension. And then if you want any more materials on aging kittens, or a quick reference sheet for what to do in those initial couple of moments when you found kittens to determine whether or not they need human intervention right at that moment, you can check out pasadenahumane.org/kittens. All right, so Chris and Izzy, we do have some questions coming in. So one of them was, well, I'll give you two questions. These are 4-week-old kittens this person is fostering. And they were wondering what's the best way to encourage kittens to use the litter box, and then how to encourage them to switch from milk replacement or like slurry to solid kitten food.
I'll jump in with that. So at 4 weeks, I would still not offer them free roaming privileges throughout your entire house or apartment. I would continue to keep them contained in ideally a bathroom setup, and maybe laying out 2 different litter boxes that can either be side by side, simply showing them where it is usually will encourage them to go there. If you notice that they're having any kind of accidents outside of the litter box, taking that little piece of poop and maybe putting it into the litter box, they'll be able to put 2 and 2 together using scent and realize that that's where they should be going. But I think fundamentally just not giving them too much space. Once you notice that they're using that pretty regularly, you can offer them a little bit more space to play around in, but I think that that would probably be the first thing. And in transitioning from supplemental feeding with kitten milk replacer to wet food, so again, if mom was in the picture, more than likely they would be continuing to use mom as our primary food source until they're about 5 or 5.5 weeks. So at 4 weeks, what I would suggest doing is a subtle introduction, still continuing with supplemental feeding using strictly KMR at least twice a day, probably once in the morning, and then introducing them to wet food throughout the day. I think initially they'll probably turn it away because it'll be a little bit foreign to them, but just taking a fingerful and putting it on their mouth, or as they stick their tongue out, the second that they do that, they'll kind of have this very, oh my gosh, that's a great reaction, and being able to put it in front of them at that point. You can use a slurry or gruel mix. The consistency of that might be a little bit easier for them to start lapping up. And as you taper off of either a bottle or syringe, you can start using the slurry as a substance that they would be drinking from using that bottle or same syringe. My biggest suggestion is that that transition should be gradual. At 4 weeks, their GI tract is still sensitive, so this drastic change from having milk every day to strictly slurry or strictly gruel can probably inspire some diarrhea, as Izzy mentioned. So just staying conscious to that, the transition from drinking exclusively kitten milk replacer to being fully weaned and having dry food and wet food will usually take about 10 days.
All right, thanks, Chris. Another question we got was about a litter that someone is aware of on their property. The kittens are about 11 weeks old at this point, and they wanted to know the best way to trap kittens and mama for sterilization.
So at 11 weeks, more than likely, these kittens are probably weighing anywhere between 3.5 and 4 pounds. So sterilization is an easy thing to accomplish. Also at 11 weeks, it's likely that if they haven't had any kind of human intervention, that behaviorally, they may be a little bit more skittish, and if you are requiring a trap to get them in the first place, that usually raises the conversation around whether or not these would be candidates for a TNR situation. Keeping in mind that every situation is very unique. There might be some in that litter who still could be put up for adoption. The logistics or operations in trapping them would be simply getting mom and all of the babies onto a feeding schedule. So if you can, if ideally those kittens and mom would be fed between a 2-hour block in the morning and or a 2-hour block at night. Kittens are very quick and very sensitive to what happens leading up to any kind of feeding time. So anybody that has cats probably knows that as soon as they pop open a cat of wet food, they've got the attention of their cats in their household. The same thing will be said for cats that are living outdoors. So having that consistent feeding schedule will make the act of trapping them a lot easier. In the way of planning, making sure that you have appointments to get them spayed or neutered before trapping them is a best practice. Also remembering to line your traps with newspaper, and that you don't want to leave traps unattended or unsupervised, just to be aware of other wildlife. And then as soon as you do trap them, making sure that you cover them promptly with a sheet or a towel so that you can minimize their stress level once they're inside. But I think that more important than anything, just making sure that you're using enticing food and knowing when they'll be hungry.
Chris, and we would be remiss if we didn't address the issue of lots of closures of spay and neuter clinics across the country due to COVID-19. I know our Pasadena Humane Society is currently closed for spay and neuter and TNR, but we are working behind the scenes on some protocols for a very safe reopening. So we're working on what that will look like for our community. But Chris, to your knowledge, are there any other resources available right now for people who need spay and neuter specifically for community cats and kittens?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. At the moment, Fix Nation is preparing to open its doors back up to the public in a very safe manner. And Fix Nation has long been one of the only organizations servicing the greater Los Angeles County area for free services for community cats. So my suggestion would be, if this is a situation that's presenting itself currently, reaching out to Fix Nation to book an appointment. They do lend out traps, and their services include the sterilization. The cat will be ear tipped, vaccinated, and then also given flea preventative medication. To my knowledge, Sarah, they're the only organization that is currently preparing to open as of this week. My guess is that as other organizations have been scrambling to try and figure out how to offer that service to the public while keeping the public and its employees safe, that there should be some more to follow.
Great, thank you, Chris. We did get a comment from one attendee who also said that in the Inland Empire, Ontario spay and neuter is open. So thank you for sharing that with us. The next question that we had, maybe Izzy, these are a couple questions you could
Sure.
take for us in regards to fostering young kittens. So 2 questions. One was, what are the best toys for kittens to kind of help them socialize and play? So toys. And then the second one was, if there are two separate weaned litters, could they be housed in the same room together?
That's a great question. Let me touch on the toys for kittens. Toys are fantastic for kittens. They love playing, and you'll see that they play with each other as well. And that's important for like social cues amongst other cats, but also interaction with humans. We typically send home like volunteer toys that are these little socks with stuffy cotton ball kind of stuff inside, and that's something the cats can bat around. But I know our foster volunteers often buy their own toys, which is great because the kittens love it. There's the little like ping pong balls that are fun to bounce around because they'll just, you know, go everywhere. Wand toys are really awesome for kittens. The one thing though to take note of is that you shouldn't leave the wand toy with the kittens if you're not supervising them, just because fabrics and things might get caught, or they might chew on something, or because it's like this long strand, you want to make sure it's not wrapping around them. But those are great because you, the human, are holding the wand toy and having that direct like interaction of playtime with the kittens, and it kind of gets them, you know, in this little hunt mode, even though they're tiny babies, and it's adorable. But any kind of toys that you can put in the kitten area that you don't need to supervise them for, so like the ping pong balls and stuff like that, that'll be helpful for when, like, if you step out of the foster room for a bit, they can at least keep themselves occupied, and then when you are interacting with them, the wand toys are really great. It's just important to note that you don't want to use your hands as toys. That promotes, you know, like scratching and biting behavior of hands, and we want to keep people safe. So that's something to take note of. As far as the two separate litters, that is a great question. And we get that a lot in our own foster base. We have people who will foster like two singleton kittens that are not from the same litter. For us in our policy, I believe we wait 2 weeks of isolation to make sure that they're not getting each other sick. So the 2-week isolation period for us is a good observation time to see if your kitten presents with any kind of like upper respiratory infection symptoms or diarrhea. That's typically the time frame that it'll take for an illness to take form and show symptoms. And so you don't want to mix kittens too soon, just because they could spread illnesses to each other. And that's just our policy for our kittens, is that 2-week period. And if they're both healthy at the end of it, we typically will mix them in, especially for singletons. Single kittens really need that interaction with another kitten. It teaches them a lot of social skills that they wouldn't get if they were just by themselves. So that's something that's really important. But again, if you are fostering on your own, I think that's your decision to make independently, or check with your own vet who might have some more advice. But our protocol is typically 2 weeks to wait in between.
Great, thank you, Izzy. Another question that came in was in regards to having a household pet, another cat who's very elderly and unable to be vaccinated. Would that person be able to foster kittens?
Yeah, typically for us, we ask people to separate their cats from their foster animals, just because one thing that's really important to know is just, you know, these kittens are strays. They could have been exposed to any sorts of illnesses while out on the street. And so our biggest concern is that we want our foster volunteers' pets to be safe. And so we ask that you keep kittens separate from your pet, especially for an elderly cat that isn't vaccinated. It's best to probably keep them separated just to keep your cat safe. Obviously, we don't have exact daily control of who is sharing what, or like, because some of our volunteers will share, like their kittens will meet their dog, and that's great for socialization, because kittens that are used to dogs, that's a wonderful adoption. or it helps them become more adoptable. But we leave that to the foster to make that decision because they're your pets. Just know that if your pet gets sick, that is your responsibility and your decision. So.
Thanks, Izzy. Chris, one of the questions that we got was about mom not coming back. So you talked a little bit about what it looks like when kittens have a mom who's looking after them properly until they're weaned, unable to be spayed and neutered. But what time frame are we looking at when we know maybe mama isn't coming back?
Depending on the age of the kittens, I think that a 4 to 6 hour kind of time frame in keeping those kittens monitored to see if mom comes back is appropriate. I have seen instances where the best intentions, they've tried to kind of keep an eye for mom, but in stealth mode, as moms usually are, they might be coming from different directions. If you have the ability to monitor for 4 to 6 hours to see if mom has come back, and without exception, she has not, at that point, that's when I would suggest any kind of intervention, either from yourself or looking for friends and families that might be able to help. That is kind of contingent on the age of the kittens. The younger the kittens, I would probably lean more towards the 4-hour marker. If these are kittens who are semi-mobile and have their eyes open, you could probably stretch that out to about 6 hours. One of the things to consider is that any kittens from 0 to about 3.5 weeks need to be fed pretty regularly. And if you haven't seen mom in a few days, but the kittens are still thriving and they have a good body condition score and everything that we talked about earlier to suggest that mom is in the picture, that just reinforces the idea that mom is there. She just kind of slips back and forth underneath the radar.
One of the questions we're also getting is in regards to some of the spay and neuter clinic closures that have happened in response to COVID-19. So one person is asking, is it better to leave weaned, meaning like 8-week or older kittens with their mom in the community and wait until clinics reopen, or would it be better to take them to a shelter or foster them in the meantime?
I think that is based on what the person, what resources are available. I think that at 8 weeks, if you can grab these kittens, this probably would lean more towards a more traditional adoption outcome. I think that if that person who's asking that has the flexibility to separate the kittens from the mom and take them indoors to a place where they're safe using the guides that we've talked about during this conversation, that would be my first suggestion. I think that the greater veterinary community conversation around reopening spay and neuter clinics has suggested that there's a high sense of urgency in doing that. So while most of them are closed right now, I think that it's safe to assume that a good deal of them will be open sooner than later. So between now and then, if you're available to take those kittens indoors and continue their socializing so that you can prep them for adoption, that would be my suggestion. I think that if there are no resources or there's no place to put those kittens, that's one of those unfortunate situations where if there is no intervention right now, more than likely what you're looking at is a TNR situation down the road once the clinics are all up and running. It really comes down to resources though.
Yeah, it sounds like always spay and neuter is the ultimate goal, no matter the scenario.
Yes.
We want to encourage people to, reach out to your local shelters to find out what their current intake and TNR program statuses are. It varies from shelter to shelter. There are resources out there available to you. Might have to do a little more hunting than usual, but there are lots of resources to help you get those animals healthy and safe. Another question that came in for us was about flea control for bottle babies. So if we find unhealthy kittens, unweaned kittens, or kittens whose mom clearly is not in the picture anymore, sometimes they're found with fleas. What can we do about that?
So this is also pretty common, but can be a case-by-case situation. Depending on the age of the kittens, I think it's always okay to give them a bath. I think that there might be a myth out there about not bathing kittens at a young age because of them getting cold. But I think when you're faced with the two decisions of, do I allow this kitten to continue to have fleas on it, which could lead to other health concerns, versus being able to be in a controlled environment where you give them a bath and then quickly warm them up. My vote would be to warm them up. I have seen cases where it does require a bath and something a little bit stronger than topical flea preventative medication. In those cases, you should always defer to what a veterinarian suggests. But simply, if you find a kitten and you know that mom is not in the picture, or even in some cases where mom is in the picture, but they're infested with fleas, that can lead to things like anemia. And in those cases, I would suggest giving them a warm bath in a shallow sink. You can use a pea-size amount of whatever dish soap you're using. It doesn't have to be Dawn. Most dish soaps that you'll find in households will do the job. Get most of those fleas off, and then quickly get them onto a heating source, and then continue to dry them off with a hair dryer if you have one on low, just to make sure that they're not staying wet for too long. But it's one of those things where the ends justify the means in intervening a flea infested kitten versus not bathing it.
And our final question is in regards to COVID-19 and pets. We do now know that humans can give the COVID-19 virus to their pets. And so we recommend that if you want a little more information on what that all means for your pets at home, to check out the American Veterinary Medical Association's website. I believe it's avma.org. Also the CDC and the World Health Organization have information on COVID-19 and pets. We always encourage people to do the best that they can to keep their pets in their home, because the safest place for any pet is in a loving home. But all of those resources have more information on information about COVID-19 and pets and what to do if you have any concerns. We want to thank you all for joining us today. Again, if you'd like to reach out to Chris and Izzy with any more kitten or foster care questions, please email them at foster@pasadenahumane.org. And we hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you so much, Chris and Izzy. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.